Hello, watching All 24 News World News program live from Algiers, and coming up next. Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune chairs cabinet meeting devoted to many sectors of endeavor. Also in our news, African Union affirms its full support for the state of Palestine. At least 3 people killed in another Turkey and Syria earthquake with a magnitude of 6.3. Also ahead, US President Joe Biden pledges new military aid during a surprise visit to Kiev. Pyongyang launches more ballistic missiles, and Japan calls UN Security Council for urgent meeting. Hello again, welcome to the program. First off, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune chaired on Monday a cabinet meeting devoted to the measures taken by the government to ensure the availability of mass consumption products during the holy month of Ramadan, as well as the development of major industrial projects related to the sectors of energy and mines, amid also rail network developments or development projects. Algerian Head of State Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune received Qatari Assistant Foreign Minister for Regional Affairs Mohammed bin Abdulaziz Al Khulaifi as Special Envoy, carrying a written message from the Qatari Emir, according to a statement by the Algerian presidency. The meeting was attended on the Algerian side by Principal Private Secretary to the Presidency Abdelaziz Khalaf, and on the Qatari side the Ambassador to Algeria Abdelaziz Al Naama. Algerian Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdelrahman said that Algeria's allocation of $1 billion to finance development projects in Africa is part of the Algerian approach aimed at a serious and modern development path for the continent. Bin Abdelrahman, in statements made at the conclusion of the 36th Summit of the African Union Assembly, stressed that the Algerian president's decision came to help African countries embark on a development path that allows the African peoples to ensure peace and stability by combining local development with the integration dimension.
This is an opportunity to work on and review President Tebboune's decision to wire $1 billion into the Algerian Agency for International Cooperation. This adds to the activation of African solidarity mechanisms. Its aim is to help the African countries enter a successful development path that allows the African peoples to settle at the level of their countries and to combine local development with the integrative dimension of development projects in Africa.
Ayman bin Abdelrahman announced the upcoming launch of the Algerian Agency for International Cooperation and Solidarity in the implementation of the Algerian resolution, considering the initiative as a commitment to the country's goal of supporting and assisting Africa.
There is work now being prepared at the level of leaders to pave the way for Africa to unite and not to be divided, and not only to solve the problems of the continent. The continent's issues must be solved at the continent, and these were the decisions of the heads of states in previous summits. This will allow Africa to have its own perspective and its own view to be looked at amid the problems that the world witnesses, especially the ones which directly affect Africa.
In response to the crises in the world, Ayman bin Abdelrahman also confirmed that Algeria is promoting an African perspective that is heard internationally. Let's take a listen.
The objective of the Algerian Agency for International Solidarity and Cooperation, which will begin its task in order to devote these projects in the coming days, God willing. And this, of course, is what perpetuates Algeria's view of helping and accompanying Africa to enter the development paths that allows it to achieve this security and this stability.
As for the implementation of the African Free Trade Agreement, the heads of state and government of the African Union agreed to accelerate the pace of the implementation of the African Single Market Project by expanding the elimination of customs restrictions among the member countries. Zahra Farjani with the report.
The 36th Ordinary Session of the African Union Assembly concluded on Sunday with a call for redoubling efforts and strengthening comprehensive African unity, with the aim of achieving continental integration in light of the global economic crisis and the dire international conditions.
De la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange continentale.
The summit is taking place at a time when the international situation is characterized by tension fueled by geopolitical conflicts and fragmented economic governance with unpredictable consequences for Africa. In order to face this, it is necessary for our member states to decide determinedly on their economic options through the rapid implementation of African financial institutions.
The closing statement of the African Union Summit underlined several projects and economic issues, most notably accelerating the implementation of the African Free Trade Area as a priority project to create a unified continental market with more than 1 billion consumers.
We need the comprehensive African unity of the member states to accelerate with determination the project of economic integration by activating the Continental Free Trade Area, which is the slogan chosen by the African Union for the year 2023.
The 2023 adoption to implement the Free Trade Area reflects the strong political will and commitment of African countries to achieve continental integration.
The acceleration of the implementation of the AFCFTA shall not only be in the context of concluding the establishment of the legal construct, it shall also be in accelerating commercially meaningful new market access opportunities across the African continent. An important step in our desire to boost intra-Africa trade and create commercially meaningful opportunities for our private sector, particularly small medium enterprises.
The actual devotion for the African Development Agenda for the year 2063 is embodied within the African Free Trade Agreement, a pioneering project that would bring about an industrial and commercial revolution in the continent as one of the largest free trade zones in the world, with a GDP of nearly $3 trillion.
Still with the 36th African Union Summit, the AU affirmed its full support for the State of Palestine's endeavor to obtain full membership in the United Nations. African leaders also affirmed full support for the Palestinian people in their legitimate struggle against the Zionist occupation.
Concerning Israel, I want to clarify some points. The issue is not hidden. We discussed last year the issue of granting Israel the observer status in the African Union. After large disagreement of opinions, the summit has decided to make a committee of 7 presidents to reach a decision over the issue, which means the observer status is frozen until making the decision by the committee. So we have not invited no one of them to attend the summit.
The head of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, announced the opening of an in-depth investigation to determine the responsibilities, following the infiltration of the Zionist entity delegation into the proceedings of the African Union Summit. The African Union confirmed that the decision to grant the Zionist entity an observer status in the organization is pending, and therefore it did not receive an invitation to attend the summit.
We did not invite any Israeli to this gathering. We noticed that a person entered the room with a badge. We asked them to leave the room immediately. This person does not live in Ethiopia, and we are investigating how he was accredited. Thus, we will hold a deep investigation to unveil reality and precise the full responsibility.
The 36th session of the African Union refused to adopt the Tangier statement and decided to return it to its bodies for reconsideration. According to a statement by the Sahrawi Foreign Ministry, Morocco's maneuvers to impose its threats of adopting the Tangier Declaration aims to deviate the African Union and create another platform for Moroccan propaganda for its expansionist policy against its neighbors, especially the Sahrawi Republic. The Army Chief Saeed Shingriha received the Chief of Staff of the Qatar Armed Forces, Salim bin Hamad bin Aqil al-Nabit, who is on a work visit to Algeria heading an important military delegation. According to the Algerian Ministry of Defense statement, the two parties addressed the security challenges in the Arab region and the African continent during their meeting at the headquarters of the National People's Army. The two parties also exchanged views on various issues of mutual interest. President of Libyan National Unity Government, Abdelhamid Dbeiba, said on Monday that the realization of justice would require political courage, reiterating that his government would work with judicial authority to spread the principles of justice. Dbeiba has made this statement on the sidelines of the opening of the Higher Institute of Justice in the capital Tripoli, in which he warned against all attempts to pilot or to plot against the Libyan government.
Achieving justice requires political courage, and today I announce before you, with all clarity and courage, that I would spare no effort to work with judicial authorities to spread the very important principle of justice for all Libyans, with their different political persuasions. I promise you that I will continue the efforts in the service of the judicial authority, a shield for the Libyans against all attempts of destruction and plot against the Libyan government and its institutions.
The UN Security Council expressed on Monday its condemnation against Zionist plans of the legalization of 9 settlements in the occupied West Bank, warning in a statement that the plan strongly opposes all unilateral measures that impede peace. Another earthquake hit the border region of Turkey and Syria Monday with a magnitude of 6.3 in the southern Turkish city of Antakya. The new earthquake killed 3 people so far and more than 200 were injured. It was felt in Syria, Egypt and Lebanon just 2 weeks after the area was devastated by a larger quake which killed more than 47,000 people.
I felt like the ground would tear apart. The ground was shaking. We were very scared. We thought the ground would tear apart. I felt like the ground would tear apart. The ground was shaking. We were very scared. We thought the ground would tear apart.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that the authorities have provided shelter to more than 1.7 million citizens affected by the devastating earthquake that struck the south of the country. Erdogan stressed that the first goal was to allocate 100,000 prefabricated homes in the earthquake area, with the possibility of raising the number to 200,000 if necessary.
We have provided shelter to nearly 1.7 million citizens affected by the earthquake that struck the south of the country, and we aim, in the first phase, to allocate 100,000 prefabricated homes in the earthquake zone. Within 1 year, the citizens living in tents and prefabricated houses will be moved to permanent apartments.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called on Monday for Sweden and Finland to be accepted into NATO as quickly as possible, although his Turkish counterpart dismissed the possibility of any link between their accession and Turkey's request for F-16 fighter jets. Turkey has delayed the Nordic countries' admission to the Transatlantic Defense Alliance, citing concerns over terrorism.
In our meetings today, we also discussed the latest regarding the subject of F-16s. The U.S. administration strongly supports our request. We thank them for that.
U.S. President Joe Biden made a surprise visit to the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, ahead of the first anniversary of the Russian military operation. Biden pledged a $500 million military aid for Ukraine, confirming that the U.S. will continue its support as long as it takes. Osama Ayadi has the details.
United States President Joe Biden met with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday on a surprise trip to Kyiv a few days before the first anniversary of the Russian military operation in Ukraine. Biden was greeted outside the Mariinsky Palace by Zelensky and his wife Olena Zelenska. In a press conference held by the two presidents, Biden promised a further $500 million worth of weaponry, including artillery ammunition, anti-armor systems and air defense radars, plus tighter sanctions on Russia.
Later this week, we will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade sanctions and backfill Russia's war machine. And thanks to bipartisan support in Congress, this week we're delivering billions in direct budgetary support, which the government can put to use immediately and help provide for basic services of citizens. The cost that Ukraine has had to bear has been extraordinarily high.
We've discussed the issue of long-range weapons, what weapons can be supplied to Ukraine, and this is very important. Mr. President, I know that a strong package of defense support for Ukraine is expected. Right now, this large package is a clear signal that Russia's attempts at retaliation will not stand a chance.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who was among President Biden's entourage, revealed that the U.S. notified Russia about the trip a few hours before President Biden's departure for deconfliction purposes. The visit came a day before Russian President Vladimir Putin was due to make a major address, expected to set out Russia's aims for the second year of what he now calls a proxy war against the armed might of the West.
We united the leading economies of the world to impose unprecedented costs that are squeezing Russia's economic lifelines. Together, we've committed nearly 700 tanks and thousands of armored vehicles, 1,000 artillery systems, more than 2 million rounds of artillery ammunition, more than 50 advanced launch rocket systems, anti-ship and air defense systems, all defend Ukraine, and that doesn't count.
The anniversary has taken on more than symbolic significance, becoming what the West views as the principal motivation for the war's deadliest phase, with Moscow hurling thousands of conscripts into a winter offensive.
Hundreds of demonstrators gathered in Washington, D.C. for the March Against the War Machine rally, with some accusing the U.S. government of being behind last year's undersea explosions that damaged the Nord Stream pipelines transporting natural gas from Russia to Europe. The anti-war event featured a wide range of public figures, journalists, and former politicians, including several U.S. presidential hopefuls.
Ultimately, this is actually a war against Europe, in my opinion. Russia has been supplying gas to Germany and other countries within Europe. The United States attacked the Nord Stream pipeline to put an end to that. It's getting very visible.
Amid Western accusations of the involvement of China in arming Russia during its military operation in Ukraine, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin stressed that China is to work with all parties to continue the efforts to realize peace in the region. Sofiane Kanturi with the full story.
Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin confirmed on Monday that China is willing to work with all parties to continue efforts to realize peace in Ukraine on an early date. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson accused Washington of disseminating false information, especially after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had warned Beijing of hindering the West.
The longer the war protracts, the more we should not give up the efforts to strive the peace. China is willing to work with all parties to continue the efforts to realize peace at an early date.
China's top diplomat Wang Yi said on Saturday at the Munich Security Conference that Beijing is ready to provide peace plan to Russia-Ukraine conflict, and that many EU leaders in Munich remain suspicious of Beijing's intentions. In response, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stressed that the West needs more evidence, which proves that China is not working with Russia.
We need more evidence that China is not working with Russia, and we don't see that right now.
Some Europe leaders had another opinion on China's intention. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock welcomed China's announcement of a peace plan for Ukraine, and she stressed on Saturday on the sideline of the Munich International Security Conference that China aimed to defend world peace is a good sign.
The United States held joint military exercises with South Korea and separately with Japan as a response to North Korea's launch of long-range ballistic missiles to hold the military drills. Pyongyang fired 2 more ballistic missiles on Monday, and according to the Japanese Defense Ministry, the missiles both landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. Islam Said reports.
North Korea fired more ballistic missiles off its east coast on Monday. This act comes to show its readiness for fatal nuclear counterattack against unfriendly forces and as a warning against the US to halt the military drills with South Korea and Japan. The missiles both landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. The United States had joint air exercises with South Korea and separately with Japan on Sunday, which comes 2 days after North Korea launched an ICBM missile in a sudden launching drill into the sea off Japan's west coast. Top diplomats of Japan, US, and South Korea held emergency talks in Munich following Pyongyang's missile launch on Saturday. Japan protested against the launches and called for the UN Security Council to hold an emergency meeting.
This launch was an outrageous act, escalating the provocation against the entire international community. And of course, we have lodged strong protest.
Since last year, North Korea has repeatedly launched missiles in quick succession, significantly increasing tensions on the Korean peninsula and in the region. North Korea's series of actions threaten the peace and security of Japan, the region, and the international community, and are absolutely unacceptable.
Following the incident, Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Monday that Beijing's position in regards to the Korean peninsula has not changed.
China is concerned about the developments on the Korean peninsula, taking note of the news released by the North Korean side, the official military exercises held in the region recently on several occasions, and the strengthening of military cooperation among other situations.
Kim's sister warned against increased presence of the U.S. strategic assets on the Korean peninsula, saying the reclusive nuclear state could turn the Pacific into a firing range.
Several deaths and dozens missing after floods rocked the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo. Heavy rains that have caused the extreme disaster are expected to go wider in the next days as forecast experts warn the country. More details with Silman Sleep.
At least 36 people died and 40 went missing after torrential rains brought flooding in Sao Paulo state of Brazil, as millions of tourists have traveled to the region for the Carnival holiday. Experts describe it as an extreme weather event. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva visited the main affected areas on Monday and determined the mobilization of several ministries to assist victims restore infrastructure and start reconstruction work.
I can guarantee that my ministers, Governor Tarcísio, will be ready to dialogue so that we can share and make a partnership to recover effectively from the damage that the rain did.
The natural disaster is challenging civil defense and fire department rescue teams as they continue their search and rescue operation by reconnecting isolated communities and clearing roads.
At least 50 houses have been demolished. There are already deaths reported, so we're still working to understand exactly what the numbers at these events are. 600 millimeters in about 3 hours, and now the ground is soaked with several parts of the city. As I said, we're still in a state of risk of fall and collapse.
Sao Paulo Governor Tarcísio de Freitas said that São Sebastião was the epicenter of flooding. Eventually, he called for a state of emergency for the most affected cities, where one casualty was reported.
We're still evaluating the size of the problem, and it's serious. It rained a lot. We have many landslides. The Santos River is completely blocked, pairs access to some communities. So whoever is in Praia de Baleia, whoever is in Barra de Sai, our first goal is to clear the way so that help can immediately reach these regions.
The last climate change repercussions are affecting many countries around the globe, causing different natural disasters and putting millions of people in danger. Experts expect floods to become more frequent due to the cast of possible heavy rains to come in Brazil.
Well, for more stories making headlines around the globe, let's follow this news in brief.
The Zionist parliament was set to hold the first reading of judicial reforms on Monday, prompted by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's religious nationalist government, which have sent tens of thousands of Zionists into the streets and increasingly raucous protests, chanting democracy and waving flags near the parliament.
Weather services in Mauritius warned the island is under direct threat as tropical cyclone Freddy approached, packing winds gusts of up to 120 kilometers per hour on Monday. The weather service advised people not to go out at sea, as the storm surge is likely to cause coastal flood in risk areas.
New Zealand warned on Monday the final cost of devastating cyclone, which has left at least 11 dead, could rise above $8 billion, as authorities announced emergency funding to help in the recovery efforts.
Hundreds of thousands of revelers dressed up in colorful costumes took to the streets across Germany on Monday to celebrate after a 2-year break from the traditional Rose Monday Carnival parade, first due to COVID-19, then due to the breakout of the war in Ukraine.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we reached the end of our program. For more, you can visit our social media platforms. From your host, Melissa Noor Khmilat, and the rest of the English team, thank you for watching and goodbye.